Amherst City Council is now in session pursuant to RCW 42.30.1111I. The City Council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. The executive session is slated to last 45 minutes. Kenmore City Council will come to session. We are adjourning the special meeting and calling the regular meeting to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Baker.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Kugler.
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kane.
Present.
Councilmember File.
Present.
All present.
You'd all please stand and join me in the flag salute. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there's any objection, the agenda will stand approved. Hearing no objection, the agenda stands approved. Next, we have presentations. New staff introduction, Melinda Merrell, Finance and Administration Director, introduced by City Manager Rob Karlinsey.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm pleased to report that Melinda Merrell is our new Finance and Administration Director. We did a competitive recruitment and she was hired just recently, started a couple of weeks ago. And Melinda, do you want to come up and say a few words? Melinda comes to us from the city of Seattle, where she was a finance director there. And before that, she was the vice president of administration at Renton Technical College. But before I steal any more thunder, let me go ahead and turn it over to Melinda.
Melinda, will you use your microphone?
Okay, so my name is Melinda Merrell, and I'm originally from the area, born and raised here. I left when I graduated from high school. I joined the Army, so I spent 2 years in the military and got money to pay for college. So a typical thing a finance person might do. And then my husband at the time was in the military, so we went various places, and I did most of my college in Hawaii. So really loved living there. That was a great experience. And then I lived in Jacksonville, Florida for quite a bit. So moved back here when my mom became ill, and have returned here since 1998. I've been back in the area. I've done financial reporting in my early stages. I also did auditing early in my career. And then as Rob mentioned, I worked at Renton Technical College, started out as the controller there for 8 years, and then became the vice president of finance and administration at the college for 8 years. Great college. If you know anything about it, if you have people that you know that want good technical skills, send them to Renton Tech. It's a great school. And then worked at the city of Seattle for 5 years as the finance director in the human resources department. And I'm here and very happy to be here. I'm so excited. I'm week 3, start of week 3, and I'm just loving it. So I'm really excited for this opportunity. And I have something for you guys.
Oh, no.
Starting in with the homework.
So thank you. The binders are done for the budget. So I did find the file that Letitia had left with the ready to print. And so I worked very hard the last few days to put these binders together. And today the binder inserts came in, and I scrambled to get them in and have them for you tonight. So I hope you enjoy looking through them. If you can't go to sleep, maybe you keep it by your bedside, but those are for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Next, we have a presentation that it's going to be hard to give, I think. We're going to honor Principal Planner Lauri Anderson for her years of service, introduced by Community Development Director Debbie VIII.
Good evening, Council. Well, it's sort of with mixed emotions, especially for me tonight, because I've had the pleasure of working with Lauri for the last 14 years. I'm going to miss her terribly, but this is Council's opportunity to honor Lauri tonight for her 14 years of service to the City of Kenmore, and she will be retiring on March 31st. So I'd like to turn it back to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to give some highlights from Lauri's career here. Lauri's worked over the years, or her work over the years has made real contributions to Kenmore. Many projects were controversial, and her professionalism and creativity were instrumental in consolidating community feedback, developing options and recommendations for council consideration. She's represented the city on many regional committees, has managed multiple grants, and been a valued and respected member on many city project teams over the years. The City Council thanks Lauri for her 14 years of service to the city and for her work towards the Kenmore vision of propelling Kenmore upward, create a thriving community where all people love where they live. I've got just a few things I want to highlight. Lauri was instrumental in updating the comprehensive plan to be consistent with the community vision and to meet our state mandates, leading public engagement processes, researching and presenting policy options to the Planning Commission and Council, writing many new regulations to implement the comprehensive plan. In 2009, 2010, the Bastier Master Plan. 2011, streamlined the development review process. Major development code rewrite, eliminated more than 100 pages of code. Love that, love efficiency. 2012 and 2019, adoption of the Shoreline Master Program and critical areas regulations. 2015 and 2023, new and amended transit-oriented development regulations. 2018 housing strategy plan, which led to 2019 manufactured housing regulations, and 2020 accessory dwelling unit regulations, and 2021 and 2022 missing middle housing policies. You've been here my entire time here, and I've always really appreciated your candor and all of the work you've put into getting the council the information that we need to make decisions. It's not always easy. I know you've probably taken your fair share of slings and arrows from the public and from other folks. Thank you for your time here. I really hope you enjoy your retirement. And I want to turn over to my colleagues. So I'm just going to go down the dais. Councilmember Baker.
Mrs. Anderson, I have had the pleasure of working with you on a number of occasions. The last one that comes to mind is when I was co-chair of the King County Seattle Regional Homeless Authority or Committee. You are an amazing person. You have been so much help over the years. I know that I can reliably turn to you, and I know that if you don't have the answer, you'll come up with the answer. You are going to be sorely missed around here. Your level of expertise is unparalleled that I've run across, and I've run across quite a few people. So, boy, I wish you all the best, and I'm going to miss you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your public service.
Lauri, I too share a lot of gratitude for your commitment to your service, your professionalism, your thoughtful approach to your work, the fact that you've always been very unflappable, even in very tough situations. I really enjoyed working with you both on the Planning Commission and on the City Council. I wish you all the best in your retirement and know you're leaving really big shoes for someone to fill. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Lauri. Just before this meeting, I had to ask Nigel, and then I had to look at your plaque because I actually thought you had been here since incorporation. I mean, that is how much, no, I know Debbie has. And I mean, that is how much I think of you as being a part of this city. And, certainly have had the pleasure to work with you on Planning Commission, and it feels like so many other things where I just sort of turn to you and say, well, what is the answer to this issue? And I know that other staff in other cities and at the county also, and the High J tea work that you were involved in and CDBG and, so many pieces of our region and our planning efforts you've been involved in and are so well respected. You're going to be missed so much here and regionally as well. I wish you all the best.
Lauri, since being here, well, number one, I just saw your smile. One of the things I'm really going to miss is your smile. Your commitment, your dedication to this city shines through your work. Your work with the Planning Commission, organizing, keeping the agenda on track, working with these volunteers who are working to help set the course for the city of Kenmore, and the work that we do on the dais as well. It's outstanding. A few months ago, I think, maybe it was a year ago, but I feel like it was just yesterday, I sent an email to you saying how much I appreciate your professionalism and the caliber of work that you bring to us. You're truly going to be missed, and thank you for all that you've done for this city.
Ms. Anderson, I want to thank you for your many years of service. At every turn, you have approached every challenge with positivity and grace, and that's a real talent. You bring a spark to every room, and you've always been a great deal of support, not just to the people who are here in this room, our council and our colleagues, but to our community. And you are going to be sorely missed. I'm not ready for you to go. So if we could still hold you in there a little bit longer, encourage you to stay, I would like to do so. But I know this is your time, and I wish you all the best in your new venture. Thank you.
Would you like to say a few words, Lauri?
I would like to say a few words. You're all going to
Oh,
make me
actually,
cry.
sorry. Looks like our city manager wants to say
Oh.
something first. I apologize. I missed you up. Okay.
Yeah, Lauri, you've been a joy to work with, and I've learned so much about long-range planning from you. In fact, I think like I told you, I've become a planner thanks to you. And I've learned from you that the nirvana of city management is long-range planning. So it's just been, we've had some great policy jam sessions together, lots of laughs, and it's always been just great whenever I see a meeting with Lauri on my calendar, I just go, all right, we get to have a jam session. So thanks for all your service. You've just made a huge, long-lasting difference in this town. So thanks.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to keep this short. I've been working with Lauri for many years, and truly a pleasure, Lauri. You are incredible at what you do. I give these comments both with sadness, because I'm really going to miss working with you, but so happy for you. I mean, retirement's the dream. So I hope you have a wonderful retirement.
Okay, so I feel incredibly lucky to have worked here for 14 years. That's like a third of my professional career. And I have worked with just great people. I, of course, would call out Debbie and Rob specifically. I've spent hours with so many planning commissioners who are always thoughtful and hardworking and dedicated to the job. And then there's the city council where the rubber meets the road. We've been through some tough issues, and I know you always have the best interests of the community at heart. So I have to say that I think small local governments are the best form of democracy. And I'm proud to say that I've spent my whole career working for suburban cities. And in a couple of weeks, I will be on the sidelines, but I will continue to follow you and cheer Kenmore on. You're a great community with a great future. So thank you very much.
The council and Lauri would join us in front of the dais here. We're going to present the plaque and get some pictures. All right. Next on the agenda is the business agenda. First item is King County Proposition number 1, Crisis Care Centers Levy. We're going to have a presentation by King County Department of Community and Human Services Director Leonardo Flor and King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division Chief of Crisis Systems and Services, Michael Reading. Then we'll have questions and comments from council members. And then after that, the public will be able to give their comment on this, and then the council may consider taking a position.
Right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, City Council. My name is Leo Flor, and I have the privilege of directing King County's Department of Community and Human Services, and I am joined by.
And my name is Michael Redding. I'm the Chief of Crisis Systems and Services with the Behavioral Health Division under the Department of Community and Human Services.
And so we've got a couple of slides. Due to the posture of this being a current ballot measure, I'm not able to advocate or oppose it. But what we will do is provide information both as to the basis for the proposal and then the contents of the proposal. We'll try to move pretty fast through the presentation, knowing that it might be better to answer questions as you may ask them. Two starting points. One, when we talk about behavioral health, we are encompassing both what some folks would call mental health or substance use disorder. These are previously sort of separately funded regimes, but both of them are what we're talking about when we say behavioral health. And then the second is that people do recover. One of the things that we certainly believe in at King County and in the department is that there's quite a bit of sophisticated treatment that's available when people are exposed to the right treatment in the right amount at the right time. It is effective, and often when we find behavioral health systems being ineffective, it's because we're not getting that access or that exposure in the right amount or at the right time. But when it works, it works. There are three problems, and so here I'm describing the basis that really informed the development of the proposal as opposed to the proposal. And there is an exciting development on one of these that your city has participated in, and we were able to announce just last week. But it remains true right now that there's not a single place anybody in King County could go where they could walk themselves in and seek behavioral health urgent care right now. You could go to a hospital emergency room. Those are not really set up to provide behavioral health care, at least in a crisis. And then too often it's the case that our jails or other carceral facilities end up really being the place where we're providing a lot of emergency or urgent behavioral health care. The second is that we are losing capacity in King County for behavioral health care right now. So the Seattle Times has reported on this recently. We have a link within the website, but if you just look at a class of beds called mental health residential beds, we have lost 1/3 of those beds in King County since 2018. I received a letter just last week that indicates another behavioral health facility will close. I do believe that we will continue to lose behavioral health capacity if things stay the way that they are right now. And that's certainly being borne out by the facts. And the third piece is that we have a workforce problem. It's really existing all across the human services and perhaps the public sector generally, but we see it very acutely in behavioral health. It does take people to treat people. We've seen this in some of our other efforts that King County is administering right now, where sometimes the building is actually the easiest thing to get. It is identifying, training, and funding a workforce that can work within it that becomes a challenge. The framework that we're using, this is really promulgated by SAMHSA nationally, but ideally any crisis system, not necessarily specific to behavioral health, will have three core components: someone to talk to, someone to call, someone to respond, and then someplace to go. You can tell by the slide, we are missing the someplace to go in the behavioral health system, but just for the analog really quickly, if you call 911, you can talk to a dispatcher. If it's necessary, they'll send police, EMS, or fire. There's this person to respond. And then where necessary, they're able to transport you to an emergency room or to the jail. So they've got a complete system. What we lack with the behavioral health system, even as we have coming online, the 988 call line, and previously you could have called 211. We do increasingly have more mobile crisis response teams that are able to come out or co-responder models. And again, Ken Morse participated in one of those successfully for some time, but there is no place to go right now. And that is the problem one of the problems that we're looking to address with the proposal. So having identified the issues, we now shift into a description of the proposal. I've got the three components of the proposal laid out here. They match the three problems that I've just described. One is the creation of a regional network of 5 crisis care centers, at least one of which will be specifically for children and youth. Michael will briefly describe here in a moment what a crisis care center is under the ordinance that we've proposed. Second is that the ballot measure, if approved, would fund the creation of at least 111 mental health residential beds. That's the number of beds that we have lost in the system since 2018. And the language of the statute requires that we would restore at least that many using this funding source. And then the third is that we must grow both the sustainability, size, and representativeness of the behavioral health workforce in order to have the people, as we said, that it takes to treat people once we open up facilities, should voters approve the measure. Michael will talk here in a moment about what is within the center as a crisis care center, but the statute, the ordinance as we've proposed, it does require a distribution. So that when we say a regional network, it would require that one crisis care center is within each of these 4, what we call crisis response zones. And then the 5th for children and youth could be in any of the crisis response zones. One of the questions that you all may have that we're prepared to get into in some detail if you would like is, what does it mean that there is a recently proposed and funded now crisis response center that will be operated by Connections in connection with the Coalition of 5 Cities? And the short answer, although we can get into it, is that could become a crisis care center under this ordinance, but it doesn't have to be. So it's written so that you can incorporate existing facilities if those facilities are compatible with what the ballot measure ordinance requires. And that would really be a choice for the cities that compose that North crisis response zone. Michael.
Thanks, Leo. So over the last few years, I've actually been doing some research and visiting other crisis facilities to see like how do different communities provide crisis services, as well as looking at the work of SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and what they indicate as best practices. So with all that information, as well as what Washington State says, we can, bill for Medicaid-funded types of services and the types of services that are allowable in crisis services, we created this vision of what we want to see in a crisis care center. The first part is like, people could just walk in. If you need a place to go, we want to have an behavioral health urgent care walk-in clinic that people can come to and say, I need to see somebody, I need to talk to somebody. And that visit could be anywhere from, let's talk and sit down for a little bit versus a couple of hours to get triaged, to be assessed, to figure out what the next steps are, what the needs are, connected to resources. And that's going to run the gamut of A to Z in terms of what people's needs are. So be able to walk in, no wrong door, anybody can come in. What happens next is going to be up to that triage opportunity. If somebody needs to be, maintained for a little bit and have a little bit more longer care because of the experiences that they're having, we want to see a 23-hour observation unit. Best practice model is like a living room model where you have recliners grouped together in an open line of sight where the staff and supports are going to be surrounding a person to be able to observe them for up to 23 hours and achieve some kind of stabilization, whether that's behaviors or connection to peers, whether it's a medical intervention, it's going to happen in that observation unit. If that's not enough, then there's going to be the ability to have a 14-day stabilization program. So up to 16 beds. 16 is the magic number for Medicaid rules, so we can't go more than 16 in order to access Medicaid funding. So 16 beds for short-term care up to 14 days, and that's driven by the state billing guide for up to 14 days when people are in crisis could be another period of stabilization. When people are in crisis, they're not designed to be in crisis for long term. So these are all short-term opportunities for walking in, for observation, for a 14-day stay. In addition, if more care is needed, somebody might need a more restrictive type of crisis intervention and be civilly committed under the ITA laws by a designated crisis responder. So right now, all of our DCRs are housed at the Chinook building downtown where our offices are. Ideally, what we want to see happen is our DCRs spread up around the county So as Leo talked about, our regional crisis care centers around the county, want to see DCRs also in those communities as well. So if somebody does need more acute care, then the DCR is there physically to do a IT assessment in order to then proceed with the court process to detain somebody. Essential features, no wrong door. Anybody can come. Prior to my King County experience, I worked on the crisis line, and how many crisis calls where I was listening to somebody and say, if we could just go somewhere. People don't want to go to a hospital or emergency room, but if we can go somewhere and talk to somebody that has the experience and the expertise in behavioral health, please do that. So we don't have those in King County, like Leo said. So no wrong door, anybody can come, be screened, and that screening is then going to triage what the next steps are in terms of where the person's going to need to go. What this looks like physically, you know, Leo's going to talk a little bit about what some of that could look like, but it could be a single dwelling where there's multiple programs. It could be a campus of buildings, you know, clustered together, but how these 4 programs are going to work together is going to be key. And that's what we're going to be designing in the course of the next year. Finally, it's really going to be the people working there that are going to be able to help people. People need help by people. So we're designing an interdisciplinary team from anything from medical staff, nursing staff, to clinical staff, to support staff, to security staff, safety staff, and peer staff. I visited programs where there's all sorts of folks wrapping around the care of that person, and it's an interdisciplinary team that's really key to the care of that person in crisis.
One question that we get, and at the bottom, what we've been clear to represent that this is not contained within the ballot measure ordinance itself, but this is something that a mandatory implementation plan that must come before both the Regional Policy Committee and the King County Council would have to address. But we do not anticipate that these would be operated by King County staff, that the staffing at these would be from providers, with the one exception of the designated crisis responders that Michael mentioned. And second, the question of siting often comes up, and our proposal is that we're really seeking partnerships and proposals from cities and providers, and that would allow the county to sit in review of requests for proposals, or those proposals then make a decision based on the parameters of the RFP, as opposed to the county being the siting entity itself. The second supporting purpose within the ordinance, I already mentioned it once, I won't linger here too long, is to fund the construction of at least 111 mental health residential beds. If you do divide that by 16, using what they call the IMD rule for Medicaid, that would be 7 facilities whose construction would be funded by the ordinance. Michael, perhaps you could talk about what mental health residential is.
Yeah, so as we introduced the first slide Leo talked about is like people do recover. So when I think about mental health residential programs, I think about places for recovery where people could have a place to live, a safe place to live, surrounded by 24-hour staff that are going to give the support and treatment and services and medications and assessment and, you know, skill building opportunities, occupational therapy treatment, community integration, case management, all sorts of things that are wrapped around that person based upon their individual needs. So it's individualized treatment based upon what that person's struggling with. More often than not, people come into mental health residential programs from the state hospital or local hospitals. And there's still a level of stabilization that needs to happen for their symptom management, for their own insight into their mental health needs. When we think about the crisis care centers and we see people in crisis and they have a place to go for short term, we think about what happens next. And so we really want to make sure that our mental health residential capacity is ready and able to help that journey for that person that, you know, once they resolve their crisis, to have another safe place to go a little bit longer term so they can focus on their recovery and building their skills back in their own community.
And then the second supporting purpose, and so again, the structure of the ordinance is that you must fund 3 things should it be enacted. 1, the primary purpose of the 5 crisis care centers. 2, the restoration of the mental health residential facilities. And then 3, creating workforce. 2 strategies that are necessary within here. 1 is to fully fund and fund at a robust level the staffing of the crisis care centers themselves. And then 2, to make system-wide investments that can help with the representativeness and the sustainability of the broader behavioral health workforce. We're talking about things like apprenticeships, for example, or paying the costs of certifications as people seek what they need to be able to enter the profession. This is a property tax levy proposal. In the parlance of levies, it is a 9-year, single-year levy lift. The first-year rate would be 14 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. What I've put up here on the main chart is the chart that we've been using to demonstrate estimated costs since the proposal started in 2022. We do now have the assessor's updated median assessed values of properties in 2023. So that really changes this in 2 ways. The countywide median using the 2022 numbers, and this is the number that is most out as people are considering the measure, is $121 per year for the median valued homeowner in King County. Under the new assessed values using the same methodology, that amount reduces to $118 for the owner of a median valued home. The city of Kenmore is in a different situation. So right now, using the 2022 method, the city of Kenmore median valued home would pay $131.76 per year. Because the city of Kenmore actually experienced a pretty substantial increase in assessed values between 2022 and 2023 that exceeds, on my review, 32%. The 2023 methodology would actually have this annual number at $139.93 per year. So wanted to show just both numbers so that folks are informed about the way the 2023 values impact the proposal. All of these are estimates because we don't know what the 2024 assessed values will be. One of the factors that we see is that the overall forecast for 2024 has some loss of value countywide, but I would not represent or attempt to represent what that might look like for a particular city or a particular home. Timeline-wise, this is now officially going to be on the ballot for the April 25th special election. If voters approve, it would require a simple majority to pass. We will then undertake the creation of an implementation plan that I mentioned. That implementation plan's passage by both the RPC, the Regional Policy Committee, and the King County Council are necessary before any funding from the measure can be expended, with the exception of $1 million that would be able to be expended for the purpose of planning. That, I believe, concludes our presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah. Can you tell me, I know we have a large population in county jail that really don't belong there because of mental health issues. Can you tell me approximately what percentage that is?
This is very much approximate, Councilmember, and the limitation of my ability to estimate this is whether a person is there and receiving mental health treatment or behavioral health treatment. There's about a third of folks there are receiving behavioral health treatment, but whether that corresponded to some behavior that has them, arrested and then incarcerated becomes a little bit difficult to disentangle. But what we do believe and what we certainly see is that there is a pretty high percentage of folks within the facility that are seeking behavioral health care there, and they are there for the types of crimes that are not going to have them there for long. And there's a very high rate of recidivism within the jail in particular. So I can't answer your question conclusively, other than to say we believe that about a third of the folks there are there primarily for a behavioral health reason.
Thank you, Mr. Floor.
Councilmember Marshall.
I'm a public defender in Snohomish County representing people detained under the Involuntary Treatment Act. But looking at it for King County, of course, are you able to say now, would this proposal make it maybe less likely that people would have to be detained under the Involuntary Treatment Act or more? And then I had a second question on the recliners, totally new to me. Is it a best practice? It scared me a little bit. I thought, is this a cost savings measure? But maybe it's some great innovation that's been shown to work somewhere. So please, sorry.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll take the first one and then hand it to Michael for the recliners question. So We do believe, and again, I want to be clear that I can't conclusively state this as a fact, that when crisis care becomes widely available, that the number of people whose crisis must sort of escalate to the point where you can call the designated crisis responders or invoke the Involuntary Treatment Act, we believe that number of people will shrink. It is true right now, and I am responsible for the team that does this across the county, that if you called from your home the designated crisis responders right now, the average response time could grow to 8, 9, or 10 weeks. There is too much demand on that system. We do not have enough people. And then, Councilmember, it sounds like you have an experience, at least in Snohomish County, and are aware that the involuntary treatment court itself has a relatively high rate of recidivism and is rarely in and of itself something that's going to resolve the underlying behavioral health issue. So the idea here is that by making something available to people the day they experience a crisis instead of 10 weeks later, that we're able to de-escalate that crisis, get those people connected to treatment, and then they don't reach that point of presenting a grave harm to themselves or others that's necessary to take their liberty under the Involuntary Treatment Act.
And the 23-hour model, it is a best practice. There's a crisis now model, is an evidence-based practice approach. And there's evidence that shows that when people, again, people are in crisis, they're not designed to be long-term in crisis. So part of it is logistics around licensing. If it's less than 24 hours, it's not an overnight, it's not considered a residential stay. So it's still an observation period for up to 23 hours. You could work with somebody. And again, if they do need more, there's other options. But the first step, least restrictive option possible, let's start with 23 hours. And again, it's an open model. The chairs are there for comfort. I've seen programs like that. It is a very comfortable environment for people to have the support wrapped around them. So, and to Leo's point, it does actually, tend to decrease the escalated behaviors because people kind of get a sense of like, people care. I can get the help I need, and so I don't have to go to the next level.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Obviously, people need real behavioral mental health services, social health services in the moments of crisis and afterwards. They're not going to get those immediately when they get into an ER. They're going to be warmed up in a bed and stay there for hours waiting for a social worker to be available. So this is a long overdue need for our communities across our state, across our region. My only sadness here is the scope of treating youth is one center throughout all these regions. And we know the state of crisis in youth and teens. We also know that the state of crisis in youth and teens is the number one related death is suicide by use of gun, right? We know that that's a public health statistic. So this is long overdue. I'm really happy we have this before us. I don't really have any questions. I do want to see hopefully a pathway for workforce development in the point of internship, not just and residency for our educators who are working on their master's and their doctorate in behavioral health, mental health, and social health services. I'm really happy to see that all the services will be on site. We know that's going to be a win-win. And improving people's lives by offering them the services they need by trained specialists and professionals is what people need. So thank you for bringing this before us. I think there's a few others behind me.
Councilor Shrubnik.
Yeah, thanks for the great presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is, and it looks like the DCRs will have the ability to do assessments on site. And if a person met involuntary treatment criteria, they would be able to stay there. Is there a locked piece of this, or they would be transported? Or yeah, so that's the first question.
So one part of it is the ballot measure ordinance itself is silent on the matter. So there's nothing that is necessary by virtue of the ballot measure ordinance. We are researching right now best practices, and the facilities that we've seen do have a room that can be secure for temporary purposes. So that's one way to approach it. We have received feedback that facilities ought to be able to, if somebody needs to be involuntarily detained, at least temporarily provide that involuntary location. But the primary purpose of the facilities, and certainly the way they're construed, is that they are voluntary facilities, primarily for voluntary treatment, and any involuntary detention that would take place at them would be transitory in nature until they're able to get to evaluation and treatment center and ENT, where folks that are designed for that involuntary treatment.
Okay, that's super helpful.
Yeah, we already have the patient placement process with our folks that are in local hospitals to be tracked. And it's like sort of like air traffic control at crisis
Yeah,
connections.
okay.
So they'll be part of that system because they fall to the work of the DCRs. If somebody is detained at a crisis care center, they would be on the list and worked with in terms of the next ENT bed, and we transport them over to that.
Okay, that's super helpful on that. The other question I have is a map question. I mean, Kenmore, we think of ourselves in two ways. One is we're very north, we border Snohomish County, and we're kind of also on the east side. So sometimes we partner with other east side cities. On the map, it looked like we're in the east section on the map that you showed us. And I was just curious, what were the lines drawn based on? Because it didn't look like they were necessarily city boundaries. And I was just curious about that.
So this is something that is in the ballot measure ordinance. And so the ballot measure ordinance defines using primarily city boundaries and then unincorporated area boundaries and their proximity to cities. I do believe that Kenmore is included within the North Crisis Response Zone, and our purpose in proposing it that way, although I can't speak to why the council approved it that way, was to keep intact the partnership of the 5 North King County cities that appeared to be assembling around the proposal at the time. So I am tracking, but we'll confirm, council member, that Kenmore is in the North Crisis Response Zone.
All right, thanks a lot.
Deputy Mayor?
I just have a comment. First, two. Thank you for the outstanding presentation. And just want to express how great it is that these crisis centers are coming into being for our community, and the impact that King County, that we are moving in a direction to address the root cause of several of our issues, including homelessness and incarceration, getting to the root cause, stopping things before they become crisis, before people lose their jobs, before they lose their homes. This is at the root of why this measure is so incredibly important. And I just wanted to say that out loud. I'm really excited about this and proud that Kenmore can be a part of the Crisis Resource Center and the direction that we're moving. So thank you for the incredible work. And I love the chairs, those lounge chairs. It just makes sense when you're in crisis to be able to get a little comfortable. Those chairs in waiting rooms are horrible. So anyway, thank you for your work and presentation.
Any other questions before we go on to the public comment portion of this? All right, I'm not saying any. Thank you so much for the presentation. We really appreciate it. At this time, pursuant to RCW 42.17A 555 subsection 1, members of the public are afforded an opportunity, an approximately equal opportunity, for the expression of an opposing view. The Kenmore City Council will take comments from members of the public about King County Proposition Number 1, Crisis Care Centers levy. If you're in person, please make sure you've signed up at the entrance if you wish to speak. If you're joining virtually, please use the raise hand feature now. We will begin with the on-site public comments, followed by virtual comments. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one individual signed up for comments at this time, Ryan Johnson.
Hi, not really pro or against, just a question. My understanding of like the history of mental health in the US is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that, we used to have larger facilities, those got shut down. The idea was replace them with smaller local ones, but then people didn't want them in their neighborhood. So I was just kind of curious what.
Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry, you need to address your comments to the council. This is,
I'm sorry.
sorry, this is for comment on us potentially.
Okay, so anyway, not pro or against, but I was just kind of curious if, you've kind of thought of that, do you expect there to be pushback? If so, has that kind of been considered where that crisis center would be? So just kind of a thought.
I have no more individuals signed up for on-site comment. Can we move on to virtual?
Of course.
If you're virtual and would like to comment regarding this proposition, please use the raise hand function now. I currently have one individual with their hand raised. Stacy Valenzuela, give me one moment to promote you. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to know where are the proposed locations. As we know, important to our residents would be, where are these facilities going to be? Are they going to be in the middle of our neighborhoods? Also, when DSHS was interviewed, they did not have an answer other than not enough workers or beds to rehome hundreds that were detained for more than 10 months and needed mental health services by the deadline. So judges released the dangerous people in crisis to harm again. Why were these details not brought forward before, so that the many innocent victims that were hurt and our streets are so dangerous? We'll never know. But change does need to happen. I strongly feel that we're already in the crisis and have been for a while, and that the state should fund 75% of the cost of this. But I do think we need several locations with longer care and more beds. I do appreciate the senior, veteran, and disability exemption, because we do have many seniors that are suffering with their incomes. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody wishing to speak? All right, seeing none, we will close that public comment and take up possible approval of resolution number 23-395. Councilmember Baker.
Yes. Councilmember Baker.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve resolution number 23-395, seconded by Councilmember File. Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Merrell.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the resolution passes, or the motion passes. Apologies.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, where's the fun? Mr. City Manager, where is the fun?
Well, it's right here. Right here in the city of Kenmore, right here in these council chambers. Couple of where's the fun things. We have some really awesome co-creators putting on yet another play. The As If Theater volunteers putting together the Sweet Surrender play that starts on March 16th, goes through April 2nd. So that's a pretty cool where's the fun item. And it's going to be at the Kenmore Community Club, and they're doing a little remodeling of their restrooms right now, and they may not be done by the time the play opens, so they have porta potties outside just in case, and so that might be kind of fun too. So the next item, now this is your just classic on the ground love note. I love this. So you've heard about the little free libraries, right? Well, somebody wanted to do a library for dogs where dogs could exchange information. And so this is take a stick, leave a stick. And I don't know if you can see there at the bottom, there's a stack of sticks. That's right here in Kenmore at somebody's house, right on Simon's. So that's just, so remember, love notes can be small, they can be big, and everything in between. This is one of those little small little love notes that just gives our community personality.
Thank you. Next, we have public comments. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Mayor, I have no current on-site public comments. Can we move on to virtual?
Of course.
If you're virtual and like to give public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function. At this time, I have two individuals with their hands raised for public comment, and we'll take them in this order. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by David Dorian. Stacy, go ahead.
Hi again, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I hope Lauri is still there because she will be missed. She attempted to respect democracy involving our residents as well as council and staff. I'm sure she pulled some hair out though many nights. She is very important with the mobile home community zoning. However, we are facing more rough times. Our mobile home community was recently sold without notice and rent increases came immediately. Some of our neighbors may be needing help. I put together a list of different opportunities from them or for them, but I'm sure there will be more help needed as we hit the 6 months. And thankfully, the Kenmore protections were in place. I'm hoping that Kenmore will also be a pioneer city and consider adding some rent stabilization to the Kenmore renter protections because we really need the help. Thank you so much.
David Dorian, go ahead.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is David Dorian. I'm a resident of Kenmore, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Council members. I'm speaking this evening to share a comment in favour of the DEIA toolkit in the context of good governance. As you probably know, the MRSC recommends local governments in Washington state pursue DEIA initiatives for several reasons. The first of which is improved decision-making so that local government better represents all communities and is less likely to suffer from unintentional blind spots and biases. Then a more equitable allocation of public resources to all communities, which is very interesting in the context of Stacey's comment just now. Increased community trust in local government by offering more options for community members to be seen and heard, as well as to better understand local government initiatives. And increase trust between community members as well by offering citizens more opportunities to interact with one another. And then also internally improved employee satisfaction, reducing staff turnover and increasing employee engagement and awareness. Those things by themselves for me represent good governance. And I personally think that's a good enough reason to pursue DEIA initiatives, as good governance should be an end in itself for local government. However, I'm aware that some don't believe in the value of governance in and of itself and see a need to see a return on investment to justify a course of action. So I wanted to comment that even in those terms, there is strong evidence that DEIA frameworks, such as the one being presented to you this evening, are effective and meet the requirement for a return on investment. In the corporate world, one statistic I read was that Sodexo, a well-known food services corporation, estimated that for every dollar spent on DEI initiatives, they gained $19 from efficiency in attracting and retaining talent, improved innovation and market perception. Further, a 2018 Accenture study of 140 US companies found that companies that were leaders in disability employment and inclusion had, on average, 28% higher revenue, double the net income, and 30% higher economic profit margins. Now, I do not believe that Kenmore is a business. I believe in the value of good governance in and of itself also. However, even for those that believe that local government should operate like a business, the value of DEIA frameworks is clear. So to borrow a phrase from a local corporation, the right approach here is a bias for action. I encourage you to approve and implement the toolkit and reap the benefits that research tells us are sure to come from doing so. Thank you.
Vicki Grilland, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I kind of lambasted the city manager and thankfully about a cost. And thankfully, the mayor cleared up everything with 2 simple questions. And I thought, well, maybe I should call him up and apologize. And I tried to find his phone number on the city's website. I put in the search, Rob Karlinsey phone number, 0 results. So I put in city manager phone number and I got a couple of results. And then I thought, well, maybe I should have gotten this information from the agenda, but there's nothing in the agenda to help me. And so I put out a request, a citizen action request, saying, how is the agenda written? Well, someone at City Hall actually phoned me, and that was great, that was fine, but I don't have a record of the explanation. I wasn't taking notes, but I got the idea that a lot of people write the agenda. I think all this could have been cleared up with a more organized approach to the agenda. And thank you all.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Oh, Councilmember Fowle, did you want to pull something off the consent agenda?
I do, thank you. I'd like to pull the short retreat report off the agenda. There's a.
What's the item number? Sorry.
Yes, let me go back to the. It's item number B.
Okay.
It's the attachment report. It's inconsistent with decision made.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item B.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda minus item B stands approved. Now we would move on to item B. Councilmember Fowle?
Yes, I found in the retreat the feedback on agreement on number 2. That's a municipal index piece. We agree to take action on that or bring that back to then file that piece after we adopt the DEIA policy implementation procedures. In its definition or how it's displayed, it sounds as if it could be a prolonged period of time. I disagree with the statement.
So the agreement number 2 reads right now, staff will review the nature and impact of the Human Rights Campaign Municipal Equality Index and advise the city council on whether to consider using the index within the context of the DEIA 5-year strategic plan. Is there a specific edit that you would propose for the two, like that section line up with your recollection of the odds?
We agreed we would go ahead and move forward with that after we adopt the DEIA policy and procedures. And we agreed to that as a council off of the direction that taking this action after we move forward on this piece would give us a higher score, Mr. Mayor. So long and short, the way it's written sounds as if it's more of a staff determination when we set the priority as council.
Councilor Marshall?
Just so, however it's properly couched parliamentary, I just want to know from Councilmember File, is there some preferred language that you think would be better to have, be more accurate to put it?
We agreed to move forward with the Human Rights Municipal Index application, applying to it after we adopt the DEIA policy procedure recommendation, the 5-year recommendation.
Councilor Shrubnik?
My recollection is a little bit more consistent with the language that's there, which is that we wanted to hear more about what it would take to do that. Our assumption was that it wouldn't take a lot of effort, but I think we wanted to hear from staff subsequent to taking action on the policy. That would be the time to take action on this piece. But before we take action, I think we wanted to hear what the impact was.
Deputy Mayor?
I recall that as well, that we wanted to hear from staff before moving forward. I do think it's important, but that was my recollection was similar to Councilmember Shrubnik's.
Councilor Baker?
I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but I thought that staff indicated it would be taking a considerable amount of time.
Councilor Kugler?
I do recall the staff saying that they weren't familiar with the content of it since it was brought up for the first time at the retreat. And my understanding is also similar to what Councilmember Shrubnik mentioned.
Councilor File?
Thank you. Yes, this did bring up some different discussion and some different requests for how much time does that take? And it takes about 45 minutes to fill out this application. Shiante Kelly Ray also highly recommended it. And talking to the experts at the Human Rights Campaign, they also agreed it takes less than an hour of staff time to complete. So that's not a very difficult task. In fact, some council members do this on behalf of their cities. So if that's an issue, that could always be something that we consider. But the beauty is we have that all recorded, that meeting. And there was a takeaway and there was a direction from our mayor to bring this back after and apply to it after we adopt the DIA policy procedure 5-year implementation plan.
I mean, I haven't rewatched the meeting, but my recollection is that we did ask staff to look into that. I think we're all supportive generally, but that we were asking for staff to actually look into it and evaluate, the amount of staff time involved. My recollection isn't that different from what I see in agreement to be honest. Again, I haven't rewatched the meeting though, because I didn't have any reason to. Councilor File?
In fact, we've spent more time discussing it than it takes to fill out. So it's a beautiful thing. Short, sweet, simple.
All right, well, I haven't heard any specific amendments to the language. And unless I do, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve item B on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve item B on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item B on the consent agenda. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, item B stands approved. Next on the agenda, we have two public hearings. First public hearing is on proposed ordinance number 23-0575, amending and extending interim regulations for an additional 6 months for certain parcels close to Swamp Creek in proximity to SR 522 and 80th Avenue Northeast, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Lauri Anderson. Sorry, you weren't on the agenda. So.
It's teamwork tonight. So yes, tonight is a public hearing. There's also following a business item for adoption of the ordinance. So the public hearing is to receive public comment to amend and extend the interim regulations for an additional 6 months to apply to certain parcels close to Swamp Creek. And this direction was given by council in November last year when you were considering the transit-oriented development regulations. The direction at that time you gave on TOD regulations, but you wanted to have a carve-out area for certain parcels next to Swamp Creek to allow study of the Swamp Creek to conduct a channel restoration assessment and determine where channel restoration would provide the most ecological benefit. So additional time is needed to do that, which is why then the interim regulations would apply to those certain parcels. Interim regulations would continue to prohibit townhouse development. And if development was not going to be using TOD regulations, then 25% affordable units would be required. So the ordinance provides the findings and justification for extending and amending the interim regulations. So I will not go into those. And if there are any questions prior to opening the public hearing, I'm here to try and answer them. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? So we discussed these just a few weeks ago, is that correct? Went through a list of.
You did, yes. You were kind of clarifying which regulations would or would not apply to the carve-out area. Yes.
Okay, and you folded in the changes that we proposed?
Yes, we folded in those changes and also as they relate to the TOD regulations, which is the subject of the next public hearing.
Any other questions? Councilmember File.
Just to clarify, we're talking about the extended buffer. I think it's important that we are using appropriate language when talking about the issue versus lay language as it relates. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. For this public hearing, folks will have 5 minutes to speak. The same public comment rules apply, including stating your name and city of residence, addressing your comments to the council, and not splitting your time with others. If your comments have been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying, I agree with X. We'll also hear testimony. We will hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this public hearing. Madam Clerk, is anybody signed up for the public hearing?
I have no one signed up for this public hearing on site. Can we move on to virtual?
Yes.
If you are virtual and like to give testimony during this public hearing, please use the raise hand function now. I currently have one individual with their hands raised. Stacy Valenzuela, give me one moment to promote you. Stacy, go ahead.
Hi, sorry it took time to become panelist. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Thank you for listening and taking action on preserving Swamp Creek buffer. Several efforts to preserve and protect, restore our streams, salmon, and fish levels have been going on. WAC 173281A 310 states existing designated uses must be maintained and protected from degradation that will be allowed that would interfere with drastically with our wildlife and flood control, thus health and safety of our neighborhood, which is Swamp Creek. This kind of was ignored with Tlachtga, and we need our ecosystem to be supported by the groundwater, the rivers, streams. We need it to be at levels to sustain the people, fish, and wildlife and natural function of the ecosystem. Also, RCW 9071-300 goals, environmental and human uses and enjoyment are not harmful to the native mammals, fish, birds, and protect the habitat. I think causing the runoff is also contamination. And we have lots of beavers in that area, as well as the heron, our unknown species that are there with lizards and salamanders and different birds and fish. We that live down here off the river and the slough are now concerned for more flooding along this area. And I've also spoken to King County about the flood zone up there along Swamp Creek, because we know that a lot of the homes up there also get flooded at certain times of the year. So this is greatly appreciated that it's being looked into. And I think some of the stronger environmentalists have also suggested that an ecologist would be involved, because this would also help with the determination of making sure that we do the right thing the first time around instead of do any damage. Thank you so very much.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? I declare the public hearing closed. Next on the agenda is a public hearing for proposed ordinance number 23-0574, amending the Kenmore Municipal Code and the official Kenmore zoning map related to transit-oriented development, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Principal Planner Lauri Anderson. This time they had you on the agenda.
Right. Hello again. So this second public hearing is to consider ordinance 23-0574, which contains the zoning code amendments and the zoning map amendments to implement the transit-oriented development rules that you discussed at your meetings in November and in February. The Planning Commission held their public hearing last October, and the City Council is holding a public hearing because of two significant changes to the Planning Commission's recommendations. The first is the carve out of parcels along Swamp Creek. That was a change from the Planning Commission recommendation. And that carve out, which you just heard Debbie describe, will be in place until the Swamp Creek corridor assessment is done. The second change is to require non-residential uses on the ground floor of multifamily developments with street frontage. For now, that's SR 522, and there was discussion in the agenda bill of our inability to require that on future street frontages at this point. So with that, I am happy to answer questions before you open the public hearing or to follow up on the business agenda.
Any questions before we open up the public hearing? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing open. For the public hearing, folks will be granted 5 minutes to speak. Same comment rules apply. State your name, city of residence, address your comments directly to the council. Won't allow time to be split. If your comments have been expressed by previous speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying I agree with the previous speaker. We'll hear testimony from on-site guests first, followed by virtual guests. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
We have one individual signed up for on-site comment.
All right.
Ryan Johnson.
Ryan Johnson, Kenmore, Mayor and City Council. We are currently in a housing crisis. There are two ways of addressing it, through increasing supply or decreasing demand. So far, we have increased supply by building out and now by potentially rezoning homes. I'm also very happy to see that now the urban corridor allows for mixed-use development. I'd like to talk about the benefit of that system and express my support for it, but also for extending it to the business and commercial zones and for having a portion of it be condos. First, mixed-use development reduces disruptions to current residents, which minimizes oppositions to new homes. Someone might care deeply about their neighborhood changing, but probably won't mind if homes are built over a business. Second, even with the same square footage, condos are much cheaper than duplexes, which means that more people can afford them. You also save on both infrastructure costs and long-term energy costs, since they are more centralized and more energy efficient. Third, this reduces our climate impact. And since this area is in the transit corridor, these homeowners would be more likely to take public transit, which reduces emissions as well as traffic. And as this construction is in an already developed area, that minimizes any environmental damage as well. Finally, it benefits the businesses themselves because having more residents nearby means more people to buy their products or service. Now, I agree that condos are not for everyone, but my first home was a condo because it was the only option I could afford. And since first-time home buyers made up only 26% of US sales last year, the lowest ever recorded, I think that is true for many people, especially here. And since condos, like any home, will almost certainly increase in value like mine did, that equity creates a pathway for people to eventually own a single family home like I do now, which for many currently does not exist. Also, because condos and single family homes are fundamentally different assets, even a large increase in the supply of affordable condos should only have a minimal impact on the values of single family homes, which reduces opposition as well. Finally, you do not have to look far to see what this looks like. Bothell is doing it right now and has a nicer, more impressive downtown area with many new apartments to show for it. Do the same thing, but focusing on condos, and you can make a real difference in the affordable housing crisis. Now for decreasing demand. We should not allow homes to immediately be bought up by corporations or people that will never live here, since they'll just rent it back to current residents at double the price and then spend that profit elsewhere. Creating designated waiting periods where owner occupiers bid first, then local landlords, then everyone else would boost home ownership without risking unsold homes. Affordable homes have always been America's stability and strength. If we let them disappear on our watch and for our children, we will have failed our responsibility as citizens and as parents. So thank you for already implementing mixed-use development in the urban corridor, and I believe extending them will only be beneficial to Kenmore, so I hope you consider it. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional on-site individuals signed up for the public hearing. Can we move on to virtual?
Of course.
If you're virtual and like to give testimony during this public hearing, please use the raise hand function now. I currently have one individual with their hands raised, Stacy Valenzuela.
Good evening again, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. King County Community Human Services reports show Kenmore has 66% cost burden residents, yet only 20% of our housing is in the levels for lower affordable housing. All that's been being built has been 80% or bonus rate housing. The deficiencies only increase as rent increases have priced out our neighbors. Kenmore frequently has empty units at 80% as well. We desperately need 50% below extremely low affordable housing at 30% and below. I understood the TOD overlay with requirements of 25%. I'm hoping you will change it to low 50% or extremely low 30% housing, since that's what we need. If we do not have units with 50% for workers, businesses will close. If we do not have housing at 30% and below for our fixed income residents and those with disabilities, Kenmore homelessness will increase. More neighbors will be living in encampments and cars. Too many developers use the multifamily and affordable housing fast tracks for permits, only to change or backtrack and go back on their original plans. We also need preservation. Where is our mobile home community zoning in this figure 1852070A1, it shows on that map walkways going through the mobile home communities down here on the slough. I also think that not enough notice for community input was given on this public hearing. I think that mixed use should not be required to have businesses on the floor. It should be an option that they allow businesses on the floor. I hope that you will take some of these into consideration because it's really important that we keep people housed, as many as possible. And this affordable housing at 80% has already been used in the last couple years when the building should have been for real affordable housing based on the needs of what Kenmore and other counties have needs for to keep our people sheltered. And I think this is really important. We're at a crisis with homelessness. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I declare this public hearing closed. And we now return to the business agenda. Right back to proposed ordinance 23-0575, amending and extending interim regulations for an additional 6 months for certain parcels close to Swamp Creek in proximity to SR 522 and 80th Avenue Northeast. Ms. Bent and Ms. Anderson.
I have no further comments. Staff recommends that council adopt the ordinance this evening.
Questions or comments? I am not seeing any. Chair would entertain a motion then to approve ordinance number 23-0575.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve proposed ordinance number 23-0575, seconded by Councilmember Kugler, Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Next on the agenda is proposed ordinance number 23-0574, amending the Kenmore Municipal Code and the official Kenmore zoning map related to transit-oriented development, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Principal Planner Lauri Anderson. Anything else to add?
Nothing to add at this time. Happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve proposed ordinance number 23-0574.
So moved.
I'll second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, the clerk please take the roll.
On the motion to approve proposed ordinance number 23-0574, seconded by Mayor Herbig, Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. I just realized it's the first time you're leaving. This is the last time you're leaving our presentation table.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility toolkit presented by Human Resources Manager Leonora Palania and consultant Shannon Kelly Ray.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I'm pleased to share with you, as you know, with the adoption of the DEIA policy last November, with that serving as the framework for our 5-year roadmap, our strategic initiative, we are also creating a equity toolkit. And with that being said, we've had it reviewed by our leadership, by our advisory committee. We're having it being reviewed by you, and I will introduce you to Shannon, who will be walking you through the exercise.
Thank you, Leonora. Thank you so much, council members and staff. I wanted to first acknowledge why we've come to present to you the City of Kenmore Equity Tool Framework as a workshop for tonight. There was a call or a request from you as a city council to come up with or present to you options for an equity tool that would compel you in your decision-making and discernment regarding budget, regarding policy, or any decision that comes before the council, to give you a tool that would essentially guide your thinking to ensure that it is equitable, that it is accessible, and it takes into account the needs of all of the community of Kenmore. And what we've prepared for you tonight is just that. So the City of Kenmore Equity Tool is essentially your guarantee to the community that you'll stop, you'll pause, and you'll reflect before making final decisions in ensuring that you're incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and justice in your decision-making. Slide. So the agenda for tonight that I'll present to you is number one, the equity framework model that we've used, the discussion, and then to talk about next steps. Slide. Again, our direction that is being shared with you tonight has been reviewed by the DEIA Advisory Committee serving at the pleasure of the city manager. We presented the same information to the Kenmore City directors to both allow for them to use the tool, to assess the tool, and then give us feedback on how to improve the tool. So again, the Kenmore City Council, in terms of the call to action, was seeking recommendations and input on an equity framework model or the equity tool. And so we offer this as a pilot to get insights and feedback, and you are going to get that presentation of that tool tonight. Slide. In terms of the framework, slide. What is the goal of an equity framework tool? Why would you require an equity framework tool? What would be the output of having a tool like that? And what would you accomplish in having it? The goal of any equity framework tool, at least for the purposes of the City of Kenmore, for its staff and leaders and the City Council, would be to identify and address systemic and structural barriers that perpetuate inequities within the city, and to promote equity and reduce disparities among its residents and visitors. There are lots of ways that the business of governance happens in any community, whether it's the City of Kenmore or King County or all of Washington State or the United States. In many organizations, you might hear people ask the question that is age old: why do we do things the way that we do? Why do we do this particular thing that we do? And inevitably, someone will say, I'm not sure. We've always done it that way. And we don't always question the why we've come to make decisions that we do. An equity framework tool requires us to dig a little deeper in terms of decision-making that has happened in the past, but more importantly, decision-making that happens today that will impact our tomorrows. So such an equity framework tool can help the city and the council to assess and analyze the current state of equity within the city, including patterns and trends of disparities in areas such as access to basic services, transportation, education, we've heard about housing tonight, employment, and even safety. This tool will help identify root causes of inequity, such as discriminatory policies, lack of resources or access, or cultural biases that might impact different communities in Kenmore differently. Develop a data-driven and evidence-based approach to address equity issues and design policies, programs, and services that are inclusive, fair, and equitable. Engage with and involve diverse community members, including historically marginalized groups, in the development and implementation of equity initiatives to ensure that their needs and perspectives are represented and considered. And then finally, to create a mechanism for both individual and collective reflection and assessment prior to finalizing decisions. Now, people hear the term DEIA and they think immediately that this is a conversation about only race, or race and gender, or race and gender and sexual orientation. And what I present is that it takes into account the needs of the marginalized within the community, but it really looks at how your decision-making impacts everyone in the community. How do your decisions impact people that are low income? How does it impact people who live in housing stock that's not single family? How does it allow for you to consider the needs of people who are immigrants or aren't English speakers or experience disabilities or difference in their lives? So a myriad of different factors. And it has you think about your own position in the community, or what frames it informs you based on your dimensions of diversity or difference. And sometimes we never know what's in our periphery or what's in our blind spot that we maybe don't see and understand. And so this has us stop, pause, and reflect and ask questions. And when we can't come up with the answers, we intentionally and deliberately bring in those voices to make sure that every voice is heard before decisions are made. By using an equity framework tool, the City of Kenmore and the City Council can work to promote social justice, create a more inclusive and thriving community, and achieve positive outcomes for all of the city's residents. Slide. And so there's lots of questions that are based on themes that have you come back and think intentionally. For example, awareness of bias and assumptions, understanding of impacted groups, slide, consideration of marginalized populations, evidence-based decision-making, mitigation of unintended consequences, and then finally, benefit and burden analysis, slide. And so I want to essentially walk through an example as a case study of a policy that is currently in effect for the City of Kenmore. And I want for us to not re-adjudicate the policy, but I want for you to use it as an example to go through these questions, and let's have a robust back and forth conversation, if you don't mind, to have these questions come into play. So we're going to kick the tires a little bit together, if you don't mind, and see how this might impact how you may think differently when you look at a policy or something as part of the public's business before you. Slide. So I want for us to look at policies or guidance around political signs. So for the City of Kenmore, in terms of background, during political campaigns, candidates often post political signs throughout the city. Listed below is the city policy relating to political signs. Number one, within the city, political signs can be posted in the public rights of way and private property with the owner's permission. Signs posted in the right of way shall be posted in the right of way outside the vehicular and/or pedestrian travel ways. Number two, there is no limit to the time before an election when the signs can be posted. Next, to help keep our streets and right-of-way clean as a courtesy to others, please remove the signs within 10 days after the election. Next, signs that are in the public's right-of-way and are causing potential sight distance concerns will be removed. Next, candidates are responsible for their own campaign signs. Next, signs posted on utility poles or traffic control signals will be removed. And then finally, please designate someone to monitor your signs, as signs that have fallen over will be removed by the Departments of Public Works and/or code compliance. So that's what we're going to be looking at in terms of guidance or policy regarding the public right-of-way and political signs. Slide. So let's put some of these to test. Now I'm going to depend on all of you, and if Brian, if you and Michelle might help me, or maybe the city manager, maybe Mr. Karlinsey can help us. He'll help point people out because I can't see from where I am because I have a lot on my screen right now to look at you and look at the policy and look at the questions. So if you might let him know, raise your hand or just jump right in when you want to speak. Let's look at some of the questions, especially around awareness of bias and assumptions. So given what we see in terms of guidance or policy, I want to ask you all the question. Have I made any assumptions about the cultural identity, genders, abilities, identities, and or background of those impacted by my decision? And especially for people who may be running for office for the first time, that may not know the rules around running for office and placing signs, especially in the right of way, and especially that these signs are expensive. Take into account some of these things. Number two, is my own personal experience, culture, or background preventing me from understanding and taking the cultural issues of marginalized stakeholders into account and deciding what issues exist for those disparately impacted? So does anything come up at all for any of you, for any of our council members, when you look at a policy like this, when you think about who might be running or the challenges for running or obstacles that may be barriers, especially when you think about a policy such as this? Anyone?
Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, I just was thinking about like how swell it was in my own campaign. Like, okay, it's over. You know, I got to get my signs out of there. I got 10 days. So I'm going to book down there and I'm going to drive my car around and pick up everything. And I can do it all on my own. And didn't, think this is actually the first time I thought, what if I didn't have a car, or a lot of people to rely on to help me pick the signs up, or if I, were not fully mobile as I am, it might take longer. I know our city's, I'm sure, is flexible, totally flexible with issues like that. I know our city manager would be, but here it is in the code, spelled out. So that's, definitely something that just occurred to me.
Anyone else?
Councilor File?
This first bulleted item could be confusing. If you look at it, it says within the city, political signs can be posted in the public rights of way and private property with the owner's permission. Public rights of way are, they don't belong to a property owner. It's a right of way. So one does not need the permission of a property owner because it's not the property of a particular assigned property. So one could look at this and assume they have every right to remove a sign if they were a resident, but not knowing that they would be breaking the law. I also see that this is only in English and there aren't any other versions or links available. And I also don't see any go-to, like who do you go to for this with questions or compliance?
Good feedback. Anyone else? Slide. Let's look at some more questions regarding this. Understanding of impacted groups. What is my understanding of the group or groups impacted by my decision? Are there unique cultural circumstances that I should consider? How has the council's past contact and involvement with marginalized stakeholder communities influenced, or how might it influence my decision-making process and findings? How am I convinced that reasonable efforts have been made in an individualized way to match the needs of the entire community, particularly marginalized populations? Have we heard from disparately impacted communities before we make any final determinations or decisions? Does anything come to mind regarding this policy when you see that set of questions?
Councilor Shubnik?
Yeah, this kind of relates to this set of questions and the other one. I wonder whether there'd be a way to provide this policy to people who are running at the point of filing so that they have a sense of that and be open to if they have any questions or challenges with it. Just to have more of a back and forth to get input.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? And I've talked to all of our council members, and I know that what is front of mind to everyone that I've talked to is making sure that for future councils, that there is even more diversity that represents every dimension of difference across the community, to tap into people who've never run for political office and make sure that everyone knows that whether it's boards or commissions or council or anything where they might raise their hand and represent the voices and perspectives and influence decision-making for the city, I know that that's a desire. And for people, some people may feel like I'm not moneyed, or I don't have degrees or certain credentials. I know that that's always been front of mind for this council. And when it comes to understanding of impacted groups, that is this part, or that is the theme of these questions, is to really think about who have we left out, and especially number 6, have we heard from disparately impacted communities before we make final determinations or decisions? That's your call to action. If we're deciding this and we can kind of guesstimate what we think some of those folks might be experiencing or what the barriers may be, before we guess what we think the impacts are, let's ask staff and let's demand of ourselves that we bring folks in. Let's do a little bit of outreach and engagement and make sure that we're publicizing this early and often and using every communication channel that we have so that we hear from people who will be impacted, especially that may be impacted negatively by our decision, before we have any unintended consequence to our decision making. So we have that slide. Next, consideration of marginalized populations. How is my decision going to specifically impact marginalized people? Have I considered how to mitigate harmful results? Have we sacrificed the experience of marginalized people for the comfort and safety of those holding privilege, the majority population, or stakeholders not negatively impacted? Are we giving full credibility to those who are sharing concerns, even though their numbers might be small or they're quiet in our community? And then finally, what are the racial equity impacts of this decision? Does this raise any questions or highlight anything from the policy for anyone?
Councilor Shubnik?
Yeah, this also made me think of, we talk about right-of-ways and private property. And of course, my brain is kind of going to, single-family neighborhoods with property where you can stick a sign. But then it occurred to me, well, how are we thinking about, multifamily properties? How do we address that? I mean, I guess they're private property, but how would you contact people? And maybe some people would want to sign there and some people wouldn't. So I just, it's kind of silent on that. So, yeah.
Councilor File.
Thank you. What's also interesting is the campaign signs will be removed within, candidates are responsible for their signs, right? They're going to remove them within 10 days after election. If you have a sign on your fence, for example, and we know people in our community have done this, it's their fence. There's something called a freedom of speech and expression. So there's a certain amount of what we can and cannot do with a policy as it relates to campaigning, but whether or not somebody chooses to remove a sign affixed to their fence could be an expression. They choose to continue posting a sign on their fence as an expression of their beliefs. So there's a balance of policy and freedom of speech. and language, of course. Also, where is the accompanying procedure? I know what the procedure is, not that there is what I would consider to be a procedure that is appropriate to the matching of the community's interpretation. So that's my food for thought.
I've got a question for you all to consider. Now, the public right-of-way is public property that's to be enjoyed by all members of the Kenmore community. I don't see you addressing green space that may be parks or open spaces that the public will enjoy, where this speech may be encroaching upon those spaces, or spaces that are designated to ensure the right-of-way and full view of people with disabilities that may use scooters or wheelchairs or other assisted devices that may depend on being able to move freely, but where we think about the line sight of people in vehicles. Have you considered about this line of sight for people that may be walking or use assisted devices to be able to access thoroughfares or walkways or other places where the signs, because I don't see any limits on the sizes of the signs, but that may present pollution in places that aren't single family or may be blocking views because we don't even have a limit. And I'm not suggesting to limit speech, but what if someone has finds some corner in particular and there's 50 signs for the same candidate in the same place?
I mean, this might be a little far out there, but when I was looking at, which one is that? How the decision impacts more marginalized communities. I was thinking that, you know, by allowing candidates to use the right of way, you are kind of, and again, maybe I'm stretching a little bit here, but you are kind of by default then giving folks who have access to the Capitol to purchase a bunch of plastic signs to use the public right of way in a way that a candidate who didn't have access to the same Capitol might not be able to use the public right of way.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a stretch. I think that happens every election cycle. Slide. Evidence-based decision-making. What evidence has supported every conclusion I have drawn? And how have challenged and unsupported assumptions? Mitigation of unintended consequences. Are there strategies to mitigate unintended consequences, to essentially neutralize the impact that may be caused by harm in my decision-making? Or can we ensure that if we understand that someone will be harmed, how can we, in making a decision that may cause harm, create a trap door for ourselves that we can go back and reassess that to make sure that we eliminate any harm that may be created? Benefit and burden analysis. Who will benefit or be burdened by our decision? Do you see any of that happening with this policy? And I think that we've just heard one, people with more financial capital may benefit a lot. People that may be burdened are ones who don't have vehicles, can't pick up signs within 10 days, or if Public Works or compliance pick up their signs and take their signs because maybe they didn't know about the rules or policies around the right of way. We take the signs, all of a sudden they don't have funds to get more signs and they're invisible in the public right of way in terms of advertising. What happens to the signs when they're picked up? Anyone have anything else?
Councilmember File?
Yes, I also don't see an attachment of or link to the WAC or CW. Why that's important is that there's very specific laws on behaviors of candidates, even whether or not these signs are removed by a rival campaign, for example, and why there's law and code and direction. Do we follow that, or is it followed through with by our city? Do we have proof of that? We know of cases, but we also know that there's direction as to whether or not time will be given to address the issue. Is that equitable? Because I would say no.
Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Councilmember Shrubnik.
This discussion raises a broader issue for me, which is just the whole electoral process is, if you haven't been through, conducted it yourself, it's kind of mysterious and it costs money. And I just wonder, at minimum, whether we might think about, this goes beyond this policy per se, but having at least, on our website, thinking about running for office, here are some links with some information about, how to do it, just to kind of demystify the whole thing. And then this would, be a piece of that, but it seems like it's maybe a broader issue.
Great.
And that actually kind of brought something to mind, something that, as we look at this and we could consider when we're talking about accessibility and funds to run for office, maybe the city of Kenmore could consider having campaign funds for people running for office. So similar to city of Seattle, but I'm just saying this as I look at this, if we're talking about accessibility and the ability to run. Now, I don't think it would be full campaign funds, but maybe some contribution to help people get started. I'm just putting it out there as when we're talking about accessibility. I do think it's actually a much bigger issue than our city, but like City of Seattle, I think they have funds for council members, at least an option for that. So are there solutions that we could do to help with that? The way we function now is we go out to the public to raise funds, which I think is fair. But if people have no access, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. It came to mind when we were talking about all these accessibility issues. Thank you.
Councilor Kugler.
Thank you so much for walking us through these questions. I think it's really helpful to do this case study. And there were two other ideas that came to mind, not specifically in response to the questions on this screen, but I think often, especially, I think in a lot of industries, we forget that people don't always know the definitions of terms. So even just defining certain terms like public right-of-way might be helpful for people who are not familiar with that. And I think a lot of times the language is written from a perspective of able-bodied people. So, accessing some of those, public right-of-ways, or as Shannon pointed out, like assuming that the site distance is from car versus walking or, wheelchair or other form of transportation, I think is, or mobility, I think is important. So this is a really good exercise, I think, for us. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you so much for your feedback. Sly. So in terms of a takeaway, the goal of an exercise like this is to allow for you to proactively inject equity into deliberation and decision-making. Its goal is preventing continued harm to marginalized communities and to ensure that equity and diversity are incorporated as values in action, that it's more than just a demonstrated commitment in word, but it's having a commitment in word to be followed by action, to have it followed by a thing that you do, to be very deliberate and intentional in your decision making, to ensure that you're increasing access and opportunity to improve outcomes for everyone across the community. Slide. So I wanted to know, just in terms of follow-up, in terms of wrap-up, for the purposes of closing out our discussion, did you see any items missing? Any items helpful or not helpful? Any comments or questions? So this is the point where, the city manager and HR director and myself, we'd love to get some feedback or ideas. Is there anything missing in the questions? Any questions stand out that you'd like to see more of along that vein? We put them into thematic bubbles to help kind of organize and inform your thinking. Anything missing, anything more, anything helpful or not helpful? And if you can't think of anything tonight, please feel free to email Rob and City Manager Karlinsey, myself, or Ms. Palanya. We'd love to hear from you. You've got the tool, you've had it a little while. Take some time with it now that we've walked through. And then in terms of publication as a final document, we'll take all of your feedback into account. We'll incorporate that feedback and then share it again with the city manager's office and the directors. We'll make sure that, again, the DEIA advisory committee that serves at the pleasure of the city manager's office will take a final look at your recommendations, and we'll send the equity tool back to you for the use, for use by the city staff. And anyone else that wants to be able to incorporate intentional DEI principles into their decision-making.
Councilmember File, you got a question?
I was going to answer. I found the discussion and the guiding questions very helpful. It also helped bring us to assert a voice where many of us have had different discussions in the past, or our community has, but they never really rise to a certain kind of level of further action. But clearly, we probably could use to polish this piece up. Additionally, I would say that when people first run for office and it's the end of filing week, that might be a very good time to invite the candidates for a meeting with the city manager and a review of the policy as it relates to campaigning and signage within the city limits of Kenmore to create a good communication and appropriate instilling of behavior. So inspiring good in everyone. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for the presentation and for putting together this tool. I think it's super useful.
Good. And once we get it as a final set of questions for you, what we'll do is move to laminate those on a card. We'll make sure that they're at the dais for all of you in front of you, so that when you have conversations and are making decisions, I want for you to have that tool in front of you so that you can look at it at all times and ask yourself that question and ask one another those questions as you deliberate and make decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have staff reports. First one, support for Step It Up presented by Recreation Program Manager Rita Moreno.
Your Honor, it is just about 9. Do you want to take a little break or?
Yeah, that's not a bad catch. Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break. Come back at 9:10.
You just gave it to me?
Kenmore City Council will come back to order. Next on the agenda, we have staff reports. First, we have support for Step It Up presented by Recreation Program Manager Rita Moreno.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here to give an update on the city support to Step It Up Camp. As you can see, the city has been partnering with Step It Up since 2019 and helping them. We've been supporting their programs by providing free facility space for after-school activities, which they offer their Latino tutoring program at the hangar on Wednesdays. And that is from 3 to 5. This is their second year doing that program. And when that program began, they had 5 students attending to receive tutoring. And now they are up to 30 students showing up every week at the hangar for tutoring. We also help with storage cabinets at the hangar. In the cabinets at the hangar, they use those to store laptops, which are used for their computer literacy program. We also assist with promotion of their free programming, assist with establishing connections in the community. And we've also partnered to develop Playday in Kenmore. So, well, not develop, but to assist them with Playday in Kenmore. Step It Up has taken on Playday last year, was their first year taking it on. And this year we are beginning planning for that event. So we're working with them, making connections with our current recreation vendors, as well as vendors that they've previously worked with. And we also assist them with programming, logistics, event promotion, and vendor maps for that event. So let's see here. And I've been meeting with Maurice probably monthly now. And Maurice and I met in 2019. And I don't know if any of you have met him, but he is a very passionate person. He loves to be out in the community, offer kids the opportunity to grow and support them however he can. And the way that we can continue to support him is to continue to offer free space for programming, assist with funding by providing scholarships for programs if we're able to do that. I also shared with Maurice the information on the human services funding we provide, and continue to share and promote the work that they are doing in the community. So, is there any questions?
Questions? Councilor File.
Not necessarily a question, but I recently had the opportunity to stop by and say hello and watch some of the great work being done during the What's Up camp over at the hangar building. So it's amazing the amount of kids who are really growing and appreciating the help with tutoring and mentorship and making friends and growing. It's a beautiful thing to see within our community, and just couldn't be more delighted to see such a successful camp business taking root here in Kenmore.
Councilor Shrevenick.
Just a couple of quick questions. This is great. Thank you. Sounds like a great organization. I was curious, the second to the last bullet there, assist with funding by providing scholarships for programs. I was just curious what we meant by that, and if they're normally free or there's normally a cost.
So,
and then, so that's one question, sorry.
Okay.
And then the other question is this, are they a nonprofit? Are they a 501c3?
Yes, they are a nonprofit, and they assist with funding by providing scholarships for programs. A lot of their programs are free. They do offer sports camps, which there's a fee for those. So, but I did share 2 months ago, I think it was, when I met with Maurice, I did share with him the human services funding that the city offers, and getting him in touch with the right people at City Hall to apply for those for that. So. We also talked about maybe doing something similar like with the Y, where we offer scholarships to attend these programs. So
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I have met him and have talked with him on a number of occasions. And what he provides to the youth in our community is pretty amazing. I've been in there with kids. They practically take over the place, studying and talking with him. And they're actually growing. They're really becoming great members of our community. And it's all walks of life. We've got kids from the spaces next door to us, from all over the neighborhood. It's a very, very diverse culture there. And I know that there is need for some of the programming, and I would really like to see if there's a way that we could help him financially grow that organization, because he is providing such a service to the youth of Kenmore. I would really like to see us help him grow that even more.
Deputy Mayor.
I would support that.
Councilmember File.
Has there been a request made for programming assistance, additional funding?
So Maurice is always looking for additional space for programming, which is something we don't have a lot to offer. We have the space at the hangar. We have the community meeting room. So space is a really big issue for him. And as far as an ask for money for, we haven't really had that conversation yet. So.
Well, I'm wondering, I'm sorry.
Sorry, let Councilmember File finish up.
So the other meeting space we do have, of course, is the fire station. That's free for nonprofits in our city limits. And it's a great learning and educational meeting space. I think we can work together on that. And I'm sure that our folks over at Shoreline North Shore Fire would also agree. I would help support providing more funding or even sponsorships for camp support through the summer or throughout the school year. This is a good service to our community, and it's really fitting the need, and it's highly needed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I'm thinking, couldn't we offer him the whole council chambers meeting room? It's much bigger than what he has now. And has anybody really sat down with him and asked him what his needs are to help grow the program, to help with the different program he would like to do with the youth? I know in the summertime, he meets outside at the tables outside. So yeah, I really want to see if there's something we can do to help him. When you've got somebody with his ability helping our children and really accomplishing something, I truly want to do whatever I can do to help him.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. Maurice and I, like I said, we do meet monthly, so I would love to continue the conversation with him to see how we could financially assist or help grow programming. Is that the direction? I think I've heard from just 3.
I mean, Councilmember Sherbeck.
Well, I think we want to know what the needs are.
Okay.
I mean, that, yeah, before we make commitments. Yeah, thanks.
But I think you have a majority of here that wants to at least have you continue the conversation.
And of course.
Perfect.
All right.
Please come back to us.
Yes, definitely.
What you find out, please.
Yeah, for sure. No, I have a meeting with Maurice on Wednesday, actually. So this is very timely. I will be speaking with him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, American Rescue Plan Act updates on business assistance and catch-up learning programs presented by Management Analyst Jenna Quinn.
Thank you, Mayor Herbig and Deputy Mayor O'Kane and council members. I will keep this short and let you ask questions if you have them. I am here to follow up on the business assistance and catch-up learning and childcare support, just to kind of let you know where we are at this point. You authorized 250,000, as you know, in business assistance, and we still have 185 of that. We used 65 in the first round. So we'll be using the rest of that this time around. So as you all know, the Washington State Constitution is pretty specific in its prohibitions against gifting of public funds. So the ARPA funds allow us to provide funding that is pandemic related and not beyond that. So it can't be to build a business. It has to be for pandemic loss, pandemic related loss. So that's really our focus. The eligible expenses have to be incurred after March 3rd, 2021, same as last year's urgent business assistance per the final rule. And then this time around, we're going to offer a broad range of dollar amounts. I'll get to why in a moment, but we've also opened this up not just to commercial, but to home-based businesses and nonprofits. They have to be 501c3s or 501c19s per the final rule. And this meeting has been inspiring. And I'm happy to tell you that we're going to go to the DEIA committee meeting on Thursday night to kind of vet what we're thinking and make sure that there's no unconscious bias built into anything, and make sure that we're doing the types of outreach that are most likely to capture the community that we want to reach. And then as required by the final rule, once this round is finished, we'll post all the recipients, the names of the recipients on the on the website. So going back to what we learned from the first round, what I learned from the first round is that we were very prescriptive in the language, and there were some businesses that we had to turn down because the language in the grant agreement and what they said that they would agree to was unnecessarily prescriptive. For instance, we had language about what dates the expenses had to be incurred in. We had language about a requirement for the Kenmore business registration to be in place before the grant ended. And so this time around, our goal we're just here to serve you and to carry out your instructions. And our goal is to give money to businesses that need it. So we're going to take away everything that we can think of in there that is unnecessarily prescriptive, follow the final rule, but be as flexible as we can. We are fortunate that the city of Newcastle right now has a grant that they just opened not too long ago. It closes on Friday. And so we've been in conversation with them. Their application is pretty straightforward and not too many questions. And I think it will meet the needs. We'll be meeting with Dawn tomorrow to make sure that we're following all the rules that we need to follow. But I mentioned the broad range of dollar amounts for the award for this upcoming round. And what we learned in the first is that there were some, so for instance, there are hairdressers or businesses that co-occupy space, and it was not reasonable to give them like a lot for their business, but we would love to be able to give them something this time around. So we want to have a broad range of amounts and not, again, be unnecessarily prescriptive. It worked great in the first round. I think it was really the right thing to do the first time around, but the farther we get away from that beginning of the pandemic, I think the more flexibility is a better approach. So you can weigh in, you can tell me whether I am on the right track or not. And then the other work that we are, most of you, oh, back one slide, sorry. Most of you were, came to the pop shops we had at the hangar. That was pretty fun. Thank you for your support for that. Oh, sorry, I missed the application. Application is being developed now for the business assistance, and it will go live probably the end of this month, at the latest, the beginning of April. And our goal is to keep it open until 2 weeks after the spring newsletter, the quarterly comes out, because we think that that's a bit way that we reach more people. I think we have really good readership with our newsletter, and we missed some businesses the first time around. I've been talking to some. So we think that will help. So back to the pop shop, you were supportive of that. Thank you very much. And then we are collaborating with the UW Bothell. It's free to the city, so it's like this really great partnership. The School of Business is going to be working on looking at our website and the business directory that is not great right now, to say the least. They're going to be doing some research for us on what businesses do, what services they provide in the city and where they're located. And then also looking at websites and how we can improve the usability, the user friendliness of the website, and to kind of meet the needs of the businesses a little bit more in allowing people to support local businesses. That's our bottom line goal for it. So. And the catch-up learning and childcare support. Now that I heard Rita, I think I need to reach out to her about Step It Up as well. But we have been in conversations with North Shore School District. The last time I came, you suggested that I talk to the colleges as well. And we've been doing that and learning about what they're seeing in terms of needs for catch-up learning. And we have a meeting with Cascadia later this week to talk more in depth about it. And then also the school district coming up. But the timeline, we are aware that it needs to be done as soon as possible. The farther we get away from the pandemic, the less we can capture that learning loss, that particularly for during the time that people were off school or online. But it is dependent upon staffing availability and student engagement windows, what is the best time for it. So that is all that I have, unless you have some questions I can answer.
Questions? Councilmember File.
So it's come to my attention that one of the areas in which there's a opportunity gap for students who are desiring to go to college and may have little means or few means available to them, that application fees can be a real barrier to applying to college. It seems like not only is it hard for our students to catch up, but then planning for that next stage and bridging that gap is an opportunity gap that exists. I don't know if we can help support these kinds of financial assistant needs with these funds, or if we can consider a pathway. But it's something that we possibly could do to improve outcomes for our youth, our young adults, bridging into their next steps and phases of life. And I'm sure that we all want them to be successful. Thank you.
Can I respond to that? It does say in the final rule that it's K-12 that they're looking at, but one of the interesting findings from Cascadia when I reached out to them was that they wondered if we could look at the students who should be coming to them but are not because they didn't graduate high school. So that's kind of along the same lines as what you're talking about, I think. So we'll explore that. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with Cascadia to just go dig a little deeper into that. But thank you for your suggestion as well.
Any other questions? Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you so much for this update and for your continued research into what the best possible use is for these funds. I was curious if you could remind me what the timeline is for this. I know we had several years to award the money, but do we have an internal timeline of when we're hoping to make a decision on some of the catch-up learning? It looks like the business assistance timeline is in progress right now.
Yes. We are, I wish we had already done it. That's my honest response. But I want to do it as soon as possible. We need to have the conversation with Cascadia first and complete that thought. And then I've reached out to the school district and need to connect with them again. Garrett and I both feel that the sooner the better, and that we don't want to delay it too long. We have to allocate the funds, which you've already done, by the end of 2024 and spend them by the end of 2026. But we both feel that the farther away from now is not appropriate. We need to do it as soon as possible. So let me get the business assistance done and the application launched, and then I will be digging into this really heavily. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Next up, Kenmore Affordable Housing Update presented by Deputy City Manager Stephanie Lukash.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I have promised to come periodically and give you an update on the many affordable housing efforts that are underway in the city. So that's what I plan to do tonight. Next slide, please. Just reminding you all for our public that affordable housing is the council's #2 priority. But the first effort that I want to just give you an update on is our partnership with Plymouth, Bastyr, and Arch to build 100 units of affordable housing at the old Shell property. And this project is so phenomenal. So grateful for your leadership on this effort. Just to remind everyone and for our public that we're talking about 100 units of housing, all at those at or below 30% AMI. The target residents are seniors, veterans, individuals with disabilities, and informally homeless individuals. And we're still working to secure funding. I'll talk about that in a second, but the plan is still, if we can secure that last $5 million, to break ground this year and open the doors by the end of next year. Next slide. One of the key features we're really excited about, and this continues to evolve and the design evolves, is a community wellness clinic, an apothecary and tea house that we're partnering with Bastyr University on. These are some renderings of that facility, and it's going to be really phenomenal, really excited. And just want to share with our community and council as a reminder, this will be both primary care, so traditional medicine, as well as naturopathic medicine provided in the clinic, both for residents as well as the community at large. Next slide. So the funding. So as you recall from our legislative send-off and many other discussions we've had, we are $5 million short on the funding, the full funding for this project. You can see the funding gap in the chart on the slide. And our first plan was full funding from Department of Commerce Housing Trust Fund. They awarded us $1 million, so we are still short. We're currently working with, thank you to Mayor Herbig and Councilmember Baker, who joined Karen Peterson from Plymouth, and we went to Olympia. We have a legislative ask on the table, as well as the Apple Health and Home funding. We did apply, Plymouth did apply for that funding. The deadline was March 9th. And so that's our kind of plan C. And then plan D, I wanted to share that Plymouth is also applying for the National Housing Trust Fund. That application is due on March 22nd, just to try to look at cover every possible option for funding this project. So just want you to know there's a lot of effort happening to apply. Each of these application processes are very involved and complicated, but we want to find a way to fund it. So we're working hard on that. I want to thank our partners for their efforts. And we'll keep you posted. Believe me, we are all leaning forward, hoping for good news on any of those fronts. Slide. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Holt property, which, as you know, is 3 doors down from City Hall. The physical address is 7010 Northeast 181st, just behind Safeway. And we are working on housing at that site with a community space that will benefit the public. And we have an RFP that we are working with our Affordable Housing Working Group on. It's been in draft form for several weeks now, but it's a complicated RFP. So there's a lot to it. We would like to see a mix of housing that includes affordable ownership and workforce housing. So that's really a key aspect of this. And we're working with ARCH, a regional coalition for housing, on analysis and continued analysis to look at different scenarios, possible units. So our tentative timeline for the RFP is to release it this spring, to receive responses in the summer, and to come back to you probably in September with our partnership and a plan for moving forward. So I just wanted to share that'll be after your August recess by the time that we would select. We want to have the open window be longer than it was for the previous RFP when we picked Plymouth, just because of the complexity of this particular property and the proposals that we're looking for. Next slide, please. A couple other things I want to talk about. So as we are in the business of affordable housing and carrying out your number 2 priority, we think it makes sense to create an affordable housing fund. And this is establishing that a fund of its own for affordable housing. We think it would help with transparency. And as funds come in, grants come in, other sources come in, it's really clear for the public and for our accounting purposes to have a separate fund for this. So we're working on an ordinance and an agenda bill for that. You'll see that in an upcoming agenda, but I just wanted to share it with you and with the public that we're working on that. And then the last slide is that we are actively working to hire a housing and human services manager. The position closes this Friday. We have 17 applications, I just found out so far. So we're very excited about that. Please keep spreading the word. We want to get someone phenomenal in that job, and that it is connected to all of our housing efforts. This person will help resource and staff all of this work I've just mentioned and other things to come. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you have on any of the things I've covered.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I have a couple. Isn't the Plymouth property, isn't that kind of in a unique situation that it's basically ready to build? Just needs the 5 million to proceed?
That's correct.
I mean, that really puts us in a unique position. So.
You're right. We just need that 5 million. We've got plan A, B, C, and D in play, but you're right.
Can we afford to contribute money when the whole property goes out, like we did on the Plymouth property? I mean, do we have funds left to help make that go other than the property?
Well, that'll be a question that we'll bring to council. That would be part of what the September presentation would be having a partner that we've selected, a proposal to bring before you, and then the full package, including funding. I mean, it was a really unique opportunity with the Plymouth project with our ARPA funds. We don't have ARPA funds for the whole property, but we'll be pursuing. And that's part of what the beauty of a partnership is a partner will also bring their ideas to the table and their opportunities to generate revenues in different ways and funds for construction of that project in the future.
Your Honor, may I help answer that? Of course.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, no. We've dwindled our strategic opportunities fund down to practically zero. And our fund balance in the general fund is about as low as I'm comfortable with. And when we bought the Holt, one concept we talked about was selling the property and getting some of our money back. So nice seeing heads nod. So Yeah, I just don't think financially we're in a situation where we can give much money to the Holt. Now, that said, there's a bill in the state legislature that imposes a third quarter% tax on REIT. And if that happens, and if you adopt that locally as an option, then that would be a pretty substantial revenue source to help subsidize projects like this.
I believe it'd be about $1.6 million a year from what I saw from AWC. If 1628 were to actually make it forward, it's not dead yet, they say.
Also, we are trying to get a stock of affordable housing here, at least workforce. People can afford. What about condos? Condos are, at least my way of thinking, a great first place. I think we should probably be working at the state level to with the legislature to help remove some of the barriers from condos being built.
That's great feedback. Thank you. And we are looking at condo style affordable ownership units as part of the scenarios that we're running on the whole property. But I think you're talking about a larger condo effort.
Right,
Appreciate
that's
that.
what brought up that comment.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor?
I want to thank Councilmember Baker for bringing up the condo issue and legislative opportunity for the city of Kenmore to support change in that area to make condos more accessible. So I just wanted to state that.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember File.
I would love to see that whole property become a site for affordable home ownership, a pathway towards first-time home ownership. We have such a little supply of that in our borders, and if we could make that a possibility, we could really improve people's lives, families' lives, and make a real difference. So I sure hope we can make that dream a reality.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you so much for this update, Stephanie. I also support what Councilmember Baker brought up. Like, we should be looking at all possible options for, I think, various types of housing at different price points. I also wanted to comment on the Affordable Housing Fund. I think that's a great idea. I think having it earmarked and separate so that people know what that money is going to is a great idea. So I look forward to seeing that ordinance in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, just so everybody is aware, I have heard through the grapevine that we may see a Senate proposed capital budget as early as next Tuesday. Apparently there's a revenue forecast dropping on Monday, and they have it cooked enough to a place where they will be able to supposedly respond to that revenue forecast quickly and turn around the capital budget. We'll see if that's true, but that's what my grapevine is telling me. So, and that is the one that we need to be looking at, is the Senate capital budget. So, let's see.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, one quick question for, I guess, the deputy city manager. We asked, I think last week, about ownership of ADUs. I'm just curious, a time frame. I don't expect it tomorrow. I don't expect it next month. I'm just curious on a time frame when information might be brought back to us.
I thought Debbie sent an email answering those questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, I think 22 ADUs have been built since we instituted the ordinance. Maybe Ms. Bent can verify.
Yeah, that's the number I remember in Debbie's email. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next, Sound Transit Open House for Stride Bus Rapid Transit, presented by City Manager.
Yeah, thank you. So the The online open house is open now for a few weeks, and then we're gonna have one here in person at City Hall on March 28th. So just want to make sure you all are aware of that, and we're promoting that pretty heavily. So that's all I have on that topic. And then I'd like to turn the time over to Stephanie for a fun picture. So we're doing Where's the Fun at the end here too. So there you go.
I just wanted to share, and it was really a thank you to Mayor Herbig and council members Baker, Kugler, O'Kane, and File for joining this large group of elected officials at the press conference last Wednesday in Kirkland to announce the location of a new 24/7 crisis center to serve North King County. So a lot of people have worked really hard on this for the last 18 months, and some really great photos were taken, and I wanted to share them with our public. You can see the governor was there. Dow Constantine, you can also see him, council members from all the cities. Connections Health Solutions presented the provider who will be the provider in the location. And I just wanted to share the location. People have been asking, it's 11410 Northeast 122nd Way in Kirkland. So it's off 100, it's in Totem Lake in a kind of a business park area, but want to make sure our public knows and council members know. That's all I had.
All right. Anything else for staff report? No, that's it. All right. Council member reports and comments. Councilmember Baker.
I don't have anything at this time.
Councilmember Marshall.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Just one thing, at the Seashore Transportation Forum, we got an update from Community Transit, and some of you may know that they offer an on-demand service, which they just recently rebranded as Metro Flex. The cool thing about it for Kenmore is that it does service southern Kenmore, like not our entire city, but part of our city, as well as Bothell and Kirkland. And so I asked if they are collecting data about our usage and whether they would be open to expanding that service. They gave me information, which you can find on their website, about taking feedback from community members, any feedback about the usage of that service, or, I think they could probably put in requests possibly to expand it. So just wanted to share that. The hours are currently somewhat limited. They call it the Juanita region, which encompasses part of our city. And it's just 7 a.m. I think to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. So I noticed some other areas do have weekend service. So I would just encourage anyone who is interested in using it, or anyone who has used it, or anyone who would like to see expanded, to give feedback to Community Transit about that. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I add to that? I totally agree. It does reach up into the 181st neighborhood a little bit, which is great. But, if I were to draw the boundaries for that service, I wouldn't draw them that way. Obviously for the whole city, but if you had to choose a portion of the city, it would be a different boundary. So I agree that we need to lobby for a change there, to either have it, or at least to have it expanded. And Mayor, you and I are going to meet with Council Member Rod Dembowski here in a week or two, and I think that could be one of the things we bring up.
Yep. Councilmember Shubnik.
Nothing to add. Thanks.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Today I provided testimony on behalf of the city of Kenmore for 5198, the bill in the state legislature on mobile and manufactured housing, extending a 2-year notice, an opportunity for our community to have a pathway to ownership. On another note, I'm happy to report that I'm the new vice chair of the King County Hazardous Waste MCC committee. And that was the unanimous vote last week. So it's kind of exciting. We're doing good things. We're wrapping up the final reorganization, and it's been good work. So that's all I got.
Deputy Mayor.
I do have something this evening. I just want to call attention to something that took place at the federal level, and I'll explain why I bring it up and connect it to our city. Especially as climate action is our council's #1 priority. I don't know that all of us have heard this, but today it was announced the Biden administration has approved the massive Willow oil drilling project in the Arctic. Many are calling this project a carbon bomb because it not only negates the administration's commitment of carbon emission reductions, it doubles our emissions during the lifetime of this project. Why do I bring this to council and why am I stating it here? Again, climate action is our top priority in addition to environmental stewardship. This project is going to have reach that negates committed carbon emission reductions and will destroy land that shouldn't be touched. And I would say that, actually I'm not going to go there, holding. But what I wanted to propose to bring back to council and for discussion and direction, either direction, is writing a letter to the Biden administration stating opposition to the Willow oil drilling project in the Arctic, the importance of leadership and action at the federal level with regard to carbon emission reduction and environmental stewardship. The impacts of this project, I'm just going to say, how are communities like ours going to be able to make a difference with climate action when leadership at the federal level contradicts the work that we are doing? I know that always doing the right thing, and we are doing the right thing in making our commitment to climate action, hiring a climate action manager, and our commitment to environmental stewardship at many levels. I ask, is there anything that we can do at the municipal level? And I would pose that leadership at the city level, even in the form of a letter to the administration, makes a difference. Silence equals approval and gives away our power. I also understand that this is outside of our decision-making authority, but I just wanted to share and provide the opportunity, if there's council agreement, even for discussion at a future meeting before Earth Day, to discuss writing a letter to the Biden administration on this issue. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, I'm in favor of at least putting it on for a discussion and considering this.
Do we have consensus? Councilmember Fowl.
I do support the intent. I think as individuals, we have the capacity to also write our federal delegation, but within the purview of which we've been elected to office. It's outside of our scope, it's outside of our state. And that's a challenge. We are, limited in our capacity in this way, but our council priorities speak volumes as well. So when we go to DC, I think the clarifying question here could be, would we be permitted to engage in this kind of discussion with our state delegation? concern. I would support that. I just think that a letter on behalf of the entire council could be outside of our scope and legal means.
Any other discussion? So far, I've seen 2 folks in favor of bringing this back. Okay, I don't think we have consensus to bring this back at this time. Anything else, Deputy Mayor?
No, I just appreciate the robust discussion, outstanding presentations by staff, and quality of this meeting. Thank you.
And I don't think I really have anything to add at this point. I appreciate everybody's perseverance, especially the Monday right after daylight savings. We got through a lot of good stuff today. And with nothing more to come before us, the Kenmore City Council stands adjourned.